Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I had you all on mute. Can you all hear me? Perfect. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I just want to make sure. Can you all give me a thumbs up that you can hear me? I've been having issues lately, so. Okay, perfect. Great, thank you so much. My name is Elicia Goodsoldier, and I am the Children and Youth Tribal Technical Assistance and Training Coordinator for Red Wind Consulting. We're based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and we are an organization that provides tribal training and technical assistance to tribal nations who are receiving funding from the Office on Violence Against Women. And so I run the Children and Youth Technical Assistance and Training project. We also have several other projects that we provide training and technical assistance to. We have a housing and homeless services program, a tribal college campus program, and a urban native programs program. So one of the things I want to note too is that if you are a tribal program or a native-centered serving organization where you're receiving funding from the Office on Violence Against Women, right after this session here, we'll have about a 15 to 30 minute window to talk about whether or not you might need training and technical assistance for your tribal program and how Red Wind Consulting can help you with that. So that'll be directly after that. I also am hoping that right afterwards, you all will be able to click on this link. It's in the chat box here to fill out the survey. This just helps us make changes. If you want to contact or connect with us, or even if you just want a copy of the slides, that's really helpful for us to capture this. So please, after the meeting, click on the link in the chat box to fill out our very short survey. It's like four questions. So again, I'm Elicia Goodsoldier. I also come from I'm an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, and I also am a relative to the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, which is based in Fort Totten, North Dakota. And I've been in this position for almost 2 years now, and I've been working in tribal communities across the U.S. for the last 15 years or so. And I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. I also, this topic is also very, near and dear to my heart too. I identify as bisexual and have been helping, our tribal youth who are having trouble in their schools and their communities, being comfortable identifying as Two Spirit or LGBTQ. So today what we're going to be talking about are the implications of COVID-19 for our LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth. But first, I want to make sure that, let's see, I can't connect to the next. I'm sorry, hold on one second here. Let's see if this works here. Okay. So we're going to talk about terms really quickly. LGBTQ, I'm sure you've all heard these terms, identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning. And then there's also Two Spirit, which refers to a person who identifies as having both a masculine and feminine spirit, and used by some Indigenous people to describe their sexual, gender, and or spiritual identity. And it's really important to note too that only those who identify as Indigenous can use this term. So really, really important on that. So if you have any questions along the way about either of these terms, feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your hand here. So COVID-19 and LGBTQ and Two Spirit mental health. You know, COVID-19 has some serious implications for the mental health of LGBTQ youth. And even though we're hearing in the news and in reports or research that youth and young people, or youth and young adults specifically, might have the lowest mortality rates from COVID-19, but they are not immune to all of the consequences, especially as it relates to mental health and well-being. And even, you know, prior to the pandemic, LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth have had some of the most significant increased risks for depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicidality. And so these risks are actually being exacerbated or more pronounced for youth who are transgender and or non-binary. So our LGBTQ youth and Two Spirit youth are particularly vulnerable to the negative mental health impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're going to be looking at things like physical distancing, economic strain, unstable housing, increased anxiety. But we're also going to be looking at ways that these impacts can be minimized, because I think now more than ever, it's imperative that we increase LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth access to a wide range of support and quite frankly, life-saving resources for them. So when we're talking about physical distancing or social distancing, you know, this is the practice of avoiding close physical contact with others, and it is absolutely a crucial part of the public health response to minimizing the impact of COVID-19. So it's also really important too to note that physical distancing, it can impact LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth by decreasing their access to positive social interactions and increasing negative social interactions. One of the I think unintended consequences of physical distancing is that loss of social connections that protect LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth from all of the psychosocial issues. Social connections, tons of research that talks about how social connections have been have the ability to buffer stress and reduce depression and improve the overall well-being. So the really important thing too is that the public health impact of loneliness should not be underestimated, especially among youth, because from a developmental perspective, loneliness is especially relevant to youth populations, right? Because the need for social acceptance and belongingness is prominent during adolescence and young adulthood. So I think, you know, it's really early to really fully understand the impact of physical distancing due to COVID-19 on the health and the mental health of LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth, but we have the ability to go back and look at the existing research that has found that youth who don't feel connected to others are more likely to suffer from respiratory illnesses, or report depression and have increased levels of anxiety and experience suicidality. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the interpersonal theory of suicide, and it was coined by Thomas Joyner. And it basically attempts to explain why individuals engage in suicidal behavior, and it also identifies individuals who are at risk. But this theory, the theory notes that connection to others can fulfill a young adult or a youth's need to belong, which reduces the risk for suicidality. So the bottom line is social connection is a crucial component of suicide prevention, especially among LGBTQ and Two Spirit individuals. So, you know, even if you are able to provide those children and youth access to LGBT, have a connection to the LGBT community, it's been found to buffer the impact of depression and suicidality. And then I think to address the negative social impacts of physical distancing, we have to make sure that we are ensuring that LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth know that they are not alone. And we have to encourage them to seek and support social connections through different means that don't rely on physical proximity. It's really important for LGBTQ youth, Two Spirit youth, and those who support them to remember that physical distancing doesn't equate with social isolation. I know that there are, you know, tons of thriving online LGBTQ communities that allow the youth to, you know, have connections with others. And they should be encouraged to maintain whatever existing connections that they have through virtual means, like, you know, video calls or video conferencing or FaceTime, etc. They should be encouraged to continue to participate in those activities, online gaming, watch parties, physical activity classes. I've seen this across many different social media platforms. So, and for those of us, you know, who are in positions of supporting and providing services to LGBTQ youth, we again should encourage them to maintain these social connections virtually, and also practice self-care. That's something that's really, really important, and being able to do this, you know, has the ability for LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth to actively seek and actively maintain connections and engage in wellness activities that will impact their mental and physical health. And I think it, you know, it goes without saying too that, you know, we are all probably currently in the process of figuring out what back to school looks like, you know, with online learning, or a mix of online learning and in school, that hybrid model. So you know, it's really important to recognize that loss of social interaction because students are not in schools. So and the impact is that they are losing access to positive connections, including, you know, sports and clubs, extracurricular activities. So, you know, while, you know, higher education institutions, schools are closing their locations, they should also at the same time, you know, in addition to the educational opportunities, they need to also provide social opportunities for our youth. Having online activity involvement, like sports or clubs, and making sure that there's active access to supportive adults like teachers and coaches and school counselors, etc. So I think the other piece that schools can also offer access to are GSAs, the gay straight alliances. Some also call them gender and sexuality alliances. But, you know, these have offering these in along with connection to counseling and mental health resources, can greatly improve the well-being of LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth, because they're able to provide, you know, youth and allies as well with safe environments where they're able to socialize and receive support and be and feel empowered. And there's been a lot of research that has found that these GSAs significantly reduce the risk for depression, and increase the well-being among LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth. So I think the other there's another piece that's really important, is ensuring that there's a presence of trusted adults in the school, as well, and having access to supportive peers is also really important, especially if especially for those who are lacking support from their families. You know, schools have the ability to offer, you know, participation in extracurricular activities and clubs, and that helps them promote positive youth development. So you know, these are some of the things that are really important, especially during this time, you know, trying to figure out what's happening with online schools. And the other piece too I want to make sure we include is working to monitor and minimize instances of cyberbullying or school bullying that could be happening. You know, we're in a new era, you know, where we're doing something completely different, and so, you know, we should also be really try to be really alert that, you know, if these things are the monitoring and minimizing the instances of cyberbullying. Let's see. Oh dear, I just lost it. Sorry about that. Okay, so we just finished that one. Some negative consequences of being confined with an unsupportive, abusive adult or relative. This is really, really important. You know, I think there's a lot of existing research, you know, out there about family rejection, you know, and a lot of our youth are, you know, during this time, they're spending their days confined to places that are unsupportive of their sexual orientation or their or their gender identity, you know, for long periods of time. And again, there's a lot of research out there that talks about how, you know, only something like a third of LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth actually experience parental and familial acceptance. Or they're experiencing parental rejection, and others are not disclosing their identity until they're adults. And so because of this, there are LGBTQ and Two Spirit young adults who are reporting high levels of parental rejection, and because of this, they're more likely to report attempting suicide, having high levels of depression. So these unsupportive environments result in increased dysphoria among transgender and non-binary youth, and a lot of them feel like they need to hide their authentic selves to maintain their safety. Just a quick note, but dysphoria is really about feeling anxiety and restlessness. There's the conflict. Gender dysphoria refers to this conflict between the gender that you're born with and then how you identify. So and it can become so intense that it will actually interfere with with your normal life. So there's a possibility that this increased dysphoria is happening because of the unsupportive or even abusive environment that they're in. So I think another piece that's really important too is that LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth will also report greater rates of sexual, psychological, and physical abuse. So and intimate partner violence is also more prevalent in the LGBTQ Two Spirit youth community. So these home environments will and can pose serious risks for the mental and physical health. So what can we do about that? Youth who are finding themselves in an environment that doesn't affirm their identity, or even places them at risk for abuse and victimization, can benefit from access to supportive adults to help them maintain their safety, creating safety plans while also providing an outlet, for them to be their authentic selves, to be comfortable. We should encourage them to seek affirming connections through either existing support networks or joining safe online spaces for LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth. And that way, these connections will allow them the space to talk about their experiences at home, and then, and also affirming that they're valued and they're loved, and that they can be safe with these supportive adults. I think one of the other things that's really important to make sure that we're paying attention to is that physical distancing also provides less opportunities for mandated reporters and other concerned folks to observe signs of potential abuse or domestic violence. So those of you that are in contact with LGBTQ Two Spirit youth should ask them directly about whether or not they feel safe and if they're supported in their current living situations. There are resources out there, like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and then also information on how to, access your state child and abuse neglect hotlines. So, I think efforts to proactively support youth in these non-supportive environments can help them problem solve and promote physical and emotional safety, and allow them, to see and know that they are not alone. So another piece are the economic hardships that LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth are facing. You know, I think we on some level, a lot of us are experiencing these economic hardships, but these populations experience the higher rates of unemployment, especially those who are trans and or non-binary and Black, Indigenous people of color. So, you know, LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth and young adults have significantly worse economic strain compared to the broader U.S. population, and there are increased rates of underemployment or unemployment, and then increased rates of housing instability, which we'll talk about. But I think what we might see is that the COVID-19 pandemic is going to result in substantial negative economic hardships and impacts among the LGBTQ populations in particular. They're going to be felt, I think, more intensely, especially as they are more likely to have economic resources. So what can we do about that? So, being able to provide unemployment resources and mental health resources is really critical. Some of the ways that we can help are providing LGBTQ Two Spirit individuals, helping them apply for and accessing unemployment funding, helping with stimulus access. I know several, not several, but there are a pretty good portion of the population who either didn't receive their stimulus or they said it was deposited and they never received it, and so being able to help them navigate the IRS website or any other help with their stimulus access is going to be really important. And then also being able to help them seek job opportunities in organizations or businesses where there are non-discrimination policies in place. And you can ask for those things too. I mean, I've had some folks that I've worked with where that was one of the first things that they've asked in a job interview or inquiring about a job is, what do their non-discrimination policies look like? And then also being able to have organizations working to create or identify professional development opportunities to help LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth that are seeking employment. For youth, they are included among the populations who have experienced negative mental health and suicidality outcomes related to economic downturns and recessions. There's actually been a lot of research done about how the Great Recession back in the, when was that? 12 years ago or so, about how the economic impacts were especially pronounced among LGBTQ and Two Spirit populations because they were experiencing higher rates of unemployment in direct correlation with higher rates of suicidality, and again, especially pronounced among those who identify as transgender and or non-binary and Black, Indigenous people of color who identify as LGBTQ. So, such a really important topic here. Housing instability. I think unemployment resources and, again, the unemployment resources, housing resources, mental health services can help reduce the risk for suicidality. And so, the economic hardships or economic strains that we're experiencing will lead to substantial increases in housing instability. And again, with LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth who are disproportionately impacted by this. And again, even before the spread of coronavirus, LGBTQ youth, Two Spirit youth were represented at over twice the overall youth rate in reports of unstable housing. And those who were experiencing housing instability were likely to report, again, considering suicide, and they were 3 to 4 times more likely to report attempting suicide. So a lot of our young adults, LGBTQ Two Spirit young adults who are experiencing unemployment because of COVID, are at an increased risk for housing instability and homelessness. And like I had talked about before, the studies about the impact of the Great Recession, studies talked about how the housing instability was found to account for a significant amount of the accelerated increase in suicide deaths in the U.S. And so this is especially concerning for LGBTQ youth because many of them might be less able to rely on family support. And again, a lot of studies that found that perceived family support, was able to buffer that impact between housing instability and negative outcomes. So how do we help decrease the impacts of housing instability? I think policy changes are a big piece of that. Being able to provide social support and attention to mental health can mitigate those impacts of housing instability. I think from a policy perspective, moratoriums on evictions or rent freezes during this time can help those who are experiencing the economic hardships. I know in my state, in the state of Colorado, we had a moratorium on evictions for several months, and I'm not sure if that's been renewed or not. I think it just was coming up for expiring soon. But and I also think that organizations that are serving LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth should be really cognizant of the impact on that housing instability can have on the youth, and we need to ensure that LGBTQ youth are supported now more than ever. And so we need for our organizations who are providing these services, we need to make sure that our staff and our services are LGBTQ affirming, so that we can reduce the barriers for LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth in accessing these much needed services and resources. And I think also, there's a lot of anxiety that's happening, worrying about what's happening presently, worrying about what's happening in the future. There's a lot of uncertainties that are surrounding the impact that COVID-19, will have at an individual and at a societal level. So, this can lead to, anxiety about day-to-day life and anxiety related to what the future is going to look like. And again, this increased anxiety will negatively impact LGBTQ Two Spirit youth mental health and physical health. you know, I think that there are, you know, several things that I really want to highlight about the anxiety. So, you know, COVID can cause increases in youth anxiety because they're worried about the health of themselves and worried about their loved ones, and you know, what does interactions with the U.S. healthcare system look like? You know, I think there was already distrust in the healthcare system, especially for Black, Indigenous people of color, and their ability to meet basic needs. So, you know, those are serious concerns. And you know, again, youth are worried about themselves or their loved one contracting the virus, especially those with, you know, pre-existing conditions. And so, you know, I think that experiencing anxiety is about having to experiencing this anxiety about having to seek medical attention if they need it, you know, or if they're experiencing symptoms of COVID. So, so these are really important to keep a lookout. Again, if you are an LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth serving organization, ask about these things. You know, to talk about whether or not they're feeling, you know, any anxiety about the present, and how you can help them. So there's, you know, I think that there's a real need for services that allow our LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth to discuss the anxieties that they're experiencing. It's really important to have individuals who can help them with this social support, and help them, assist them in exploring ways that they can access additional resources, and especially, you know, given the significant physical associated with the pandemic. It's often not until well after, you know, the disease containment that the mental health and the psychological support programs begin to be prioritized. And so that's why, you know, it's really important to act early in the prevention of these lasting, potential lasting mental health and outcomes. So again, need for services that allow them to discuss their anxieties with supporting and listening individuals, providing them with social supports, assisting in exploring ways to access additional resources, and really important, accessing remote support through telehealth and phone and digital-based crisis services, and then finding 24/7 access to support them where there's, you know, hopefully no cost to them. So really important. So not only are they worrying about, you know, the present, but they're also worrying about the future. So, you know, COVID is making the future less certain and more distant. At least that's how it's.
Yeah. All right, let's check this. All right.
If I can have folks please mute themselves. Thank you. So, you know, again, COVID is making the future less certain, even more distant, you know, for some of our LGBTQ youth. So they're experiencing this anxiety related to the expectations for the future. So what does it look like? What is school going to look like? What are my future relationships going to look like? What does the path to my future goals and my aspirations, you know, what are they going to look like? Just, you know, there's so much uncertainty. And so, you know, while these feelings of anxiety related to these changes might already be present for youth, you know, but the pandemic has the potential to exacerbate what's already present, or even introduce new concerns for LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth. I've heard, some talk about, the concerns about being able to achieve independence, and how, and is it likely to impact, youth, because of the uncertainty about when the country is going to return to normal. And even for, some youth who are leaving home, oftentimes leaving home is going to be an adaptive way to cope with conflict or maltreatment that might be happening at home. And so, not being able to leave the home or leave, any of the negative experiences that they're experiencing, it's creating so much anxiety. I've also heard that some youth, who are waiting until they're adults to disclose their identity to their family members, is also, been an issue. So, our LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth who are not in supportive environments, and maybe they're waiting until they're able to graduate high school or become the legal age to move to a more supportive environment. They're feeling that the pandemic is halting, or postponing their ability to live as and embrace their true authentic selves. So, helping them move through this anxiety, alleviating this anxiety about their future, is really important. So access to supportive individuals, providing or seeking out online communities will might or can help alleviate anxiety about the future. It also has the ability to provide an outlet for identity support or for expression. And so, again, it's really important that LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth who are experiencing these increased levels of anxiety have access to supportive individuals that they can discuss their concerns with and talk about strategies that help alleviate some of the anxiety for them. So, these individuals can support youth not only in helping with adjusting to the possibility of new time frames and what they might mean, but also in their LGBTQ and Two Spirit identity. So, being able to encourage them to encourage them to utilize online communities, which they may feel more open to trying out their LGBTQ identity if they're not able to do that in their current environment. So, so these are some of the things that I think, we're able to provide and help them. After this webinar here, I will actually email you all. I forgot to include it in this, but I will email you some really great resources out there, both in what's happening within Native organizations that are primarily serving LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth, and then also, other mainstream organizations that are doing really great work to provide supporting spaces for LGBTQ and Two Spirit youth. So. So that's the end. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box if you like, or use your mic. Grantee, OVW tribal grantee. I'll be sticking around for the next 15 to 30 minutes, and we can talk about how our tribal TTA program can help you, especially when it comes to children and youth programming. So thank you so much for everybody for being here. Again, if I encourage you to fill out the survey. If you want a copy of these slides, please request that, and I will be sure to email you all the resource documents.